Well, okay. So that's what you call a serving suggestion. Um, hey there, it's your old pal Keith from wavetables.lol. That's wavetables.lol, and I'm back with another surely talky video that I teased at the end of my last one, where once again we were talking about new waveforms and wavetables that are in KRC Mathwaves, my gigantic collection of more than 120,000 wavetables for all the modern wavetable synths. If you've watched my videos before, you've heard this spiel 100 times, and so I'm going to cut it short. What you just heard are some variations on basic synthesis waveforms, which I've incorporated into the KRC Mathwaves collection. Having tackled a whole bunch of unusual, underheard, and maybe never before heard waveforms. I'm going back to basics a little bit, and tackling some, maybe you could call them utility waveforms, but also some new things like these guys over here, which I call the shark waveforms because they're like shark fin waveforms. But also your standard fare like sawtooths and pulses and square waves and stuff like that. And so ultimately, what we're really talking about today is variations on the triangle wave. And the triangle wave is very boring. But let's go get a triangle wave and let's talk about it a little bit. Or wait a minute. Let's not go to a triangle wave yet. Let's talk about our friend the sawtooth wave, who is kind of a variation on the triangle wave, and we'll get there. Let me go to one of my other patches here. Let's find our saws. Where's our saw patch? Now, in the original Mathwaves collection, in Mathwaves Volume 1, you will find variations on various sawtooth waves with different slopes. We'll talk about that in a second, but I wasn't really happy with them because I didn't feel like I had like really changed the slopes enough, and I was concerned about a couple other things. So I've redone those, and those are now in the what I call KRC Mathwaves Volume 4 when you're in modwave, and you'll find them in their own folder underneath KRC Mathwaves Volume 4 in the Serum directories, the Wave Edit directories, the WT directories, which are for Surge XT and Bitwig. But let's refresh our memory about what a sawtooth waveform sounds like. I'm going to go over here to Oscillator 2. Included with modwave and with just about every other wavetable synthesizer, you will have, a basic sort of wavetable, or maybe multiple of them that will give you access to the basic synthesis waves, like the sine wave. Oops, that's not making a sound. Why is that not making a sound? I don't hear it making a sound. What did I do wrong? What did I do? Oh, it's because I'm very low on the keyboard. You might have heard that subsonic rumble. There we go. The old sine wave, which is a pure single harmonic, right? Also, move your damn head, Keith. There we go. I'll put myself over here today. All right, so we've got the sine wave, right? The triangle wave, the square wave, and the sawtooth wave. There we go. There's our sawtooth wave. This is what a sawtooth wave sounds like, with no filtering, right? Now, if you look at this waveform, and it might help if we changed our phase a little bit on it, so we can see what's going on. The sawtooth wave is just a linear ramp down, right, from the maximum point, the maximum value in our waveform to the lowest value in our waveform. And in an ideal sawtooth wave, that ramp is purely linear. But of course, we could imagine sawtooth waves with different curves. And so in KRC Mathwaves, you will find, let me just click into here so you can see where it is. When you import these into modwave using the MW bundle format, you will get a new collection here called KRC Math Volume 4. Now, unlike some of my other collections, this one is a little bit smaller. like quite a bit, because there's not like a gajillion wavetables in here. There's just some really core kind of basic synthesis stuff. And so you'll find this exponential saws. The EXP saws means exponential. And this wavetable goes from, helps if you turn your mixer volume up, goes from a pure sine, right? The traditional linear ramp sine. But then we're going to kind of sag the slope of this so that it gets more and more exponential as we move up the wavetable. And you can hear how that gets more nasal. It helps if you're playing multiple notes. Now, these kind of subtle variations in a sawtooth can actually add a lot to its character. And so, a lot of times, and these were created purely mathematically. I computed these waveforms in the time domain to be exactly the shapes that I wanted, from a linear ramp to this really steep exponential ramp. But, sometimes people will sample, hardware synthesizers to kind of extract their kind of unique and quirky waveforms from them. And so these little changes, though they're not sonically very perceptible, they actually can make a big difference in a final patch or a final sound. And so, one thing we can do is we can make the ramp more exponential. The other thing we could do is we could make a sawtooth that has a logarithmic slope. So you'll see in this wavetable, we go from something that's very close to a pure linear sine. It has a tiny bit of logarithmic slope to it, but for all intents and purposes, it sounds like a pure linear one. And then as we go up, the wavetable, once again, it gets more nasal. And, one thing that we could sweep that, I guess. Maybe a little slower. You can hear that subtle change that happens over the life of the wavetable sweep. Let's bring in a traditional sawtooth wave from our modwave basic waves. And these are obviously detuned with respect to each other. You can see that makes a subtle difference. And then if we were to bring in our filter cutoff and resonance, let's take the envelope off of. So those are two basically linear saws. And there is a logarithmic saw mixed with a pure linear saw. And so, what you can do with these things is you've actually heard them already in today's intro tune. That was, what the hell was that called? Is that, it's Shark Explorer 2. So in the arpeggiated pattern that plays here, what we're hearing, there is some modulation on the AB wavetable here, but let's turn that off. So what we're hearing here is an exponential saw with a logarithmic saw. And it's pretty cool. And if we were to adjust these so that they're both linear, I think you'll probably be able to hear a little bit of the difference. Yeah, hear that? There's your regular boring linear sawtooth, and here are some more active, modulated, exponential, and logarithmic sawtooth waveforms. So there's a cool thing you can do, and boy, let's make it stop, shall we? If we're just arping forever. There's a lot of different new things you can do, and these tiny changes actually contribute some differences that you might usually associate with filtering. And so using these different like saw shapes with different ramps on them can actually give your filtered your final patch a different sound. And sometimes they're kind of juicy, and we'll get to a little more juiciness a little later. Okay, so you've got exponential, you've got logarithmic sawtooth waves. There's another kind of shape that we could do. Let's go look at this one. Let's see. We've got os2 down. Yeah. Instead of, say, like a straight line that either like sags down as in exponential or kind of ramps up as in logarithmic, you could have a polynomial curve, kind of an S curve. And so here's a a sawtooth wave that has different steepnesses of S curves on it. And you can hear that it's quite different from a purely linear ramp, a sawtooth wave. And if we were to sweep that, let's go any slower. It's like a very gentle filter. Another interesting thing is like in modwave. Modwave. When you're in modwave, you've got these like modifiers that can be applied to the wavetable. So, we could just look at the odd harmonics. And so, now we've got like this kind of gently filtering square wave, essentially. It only has the odd harmonics. Even harmonics look like this. And that's kind of a cool waveform in itself, right? We could increase the decay here. There's like this very gentle timbral motion, even though we don't have our filter engaged. But if we were to add, our filter to that and some resonance. And in this case, let's see, I guess we have multiple voices on here, so we're using unison 3 with the detune of 9. Oh wait, were we really? I guess we are. You can hear how these polygonal slope sawtooths have a little bit of, they get a little more sine-like when you get down. And you see that this is it's starting to look like a sine wave. We're not going all the way to computing a sine wave where these loop around and it's perfectly a sine. But anyway, blah, 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 talky. How long have I been going? This is a thing I do all the time. I talk about how long I've been going. 14 minutes. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. Although I'm going to pause because I had a beverage here and now I'm missing my beverage. Like, you can't make a YouTube video without a beverage, and you can't watch one without a beverage. So, I'm going to pause, and so you won't see the intervening time, but you should pause right now and go make yourself a beverage, and then we'll continue, okay? Having procured ourselves a beverage, before we move on from the sawtooth wave, I want to follow my face. Thank you. Before we move on from the sawtooth wave, I wanted to point out a very common thing that we can do with sawtooth waves, which is to detune two of them with respect to each other. This has a very specific sound, and so what I've done is I've taken my Sawtooth Variations poly patch here, and instead of just having one oscillator as we were listening to, I've brought in a second one, and we're actually sweeping this wavetable in the opposite direction. And we've detuned them with respect to each other by 5 cents here each. So this is a technique that's used in pad things and even in basses sometimes, right? It's a very, very common technique. But I wanted to just have you listen to it for a moment because the sound is going to come back. That particular phasing of the waveforms against each other. Okay, now having I'm going to save what I did there. All right, having explored the sawtooth wave, and now that we understand that when we see a waveform with some sort of ramp, we could change the shape of that ramp to get different sounds out of it. I moved on to the triangle wave. Let's get this patch up here. Now, the triangle wave is, I mean, I guess it's in some ways one of my least favorite waveforms. It's it's boring, right? It's like there's not much for, say, a filter to grab onto. Right? It's a very subtle waveform, and actually the triangle wave is very much like the square wave in that it only has odd harmonics, but the harmonics fall off. They fall off in a different relationship, whereas the square wave, the harmonics fall off in a 1 over n relationship. In the triangle wave, they fall off much quicker in a 1 over n squared relationship to the harmonic number. Okay, so a triangle wave, right, is a waveform that goes from the minimum to the maximum at the halfway point, and then goes back from the maximum to the minimum. And so you can see that it sort of looks like a triangle. And so to make the triangle wave more interesting, here is a wavetable where we have changed the slope of those two curves exponentially. And so we can hear what it sounds like now. Let's take our cutoff up. Now that's a little more interesting, right? Okay. What else did I want to say about this? Just like we can change the slopes exponentially, and maybe we'll take our envelope off or change it a little bit. Let's see. That's nice. We also did a version where we've got the slopes logarithmic, right? Just like we did with the, oops, I think I put that into its own patch to make it easier for myself, but I'm just trying to rebuild the whole patch. What a dum-dum. All right, let's see. Oh, that's not where I wanted to go. We want to go to variations log. Okay, so here is the triangle wave, again, where we've changed its slope in a logarithmic fashion. And so you can see when we get up to the end of this wavetable, it's practically a square wave. All right. And here's how that sounds swept. Let's see. There's a lot, at the upper end of this wavetable for a filter to grab onto, right? So we'll probably hear something. Cool. All right. Now, it had occurred to me after this, there's one more variation here. I did again, a polynomial change to the triangle wave. Polynomial curves for the slopes of our waveform. And it's interesting here that now at this point, we're starting to get, more sawtooth-like sound, right? And okay, so now having looked at the triangle wave and done, these different variations on its slopes, I was like, hey, this is kind of interesting because if we look at, actually, let's look at the exponential one because good Lord. Because the triangle wave here at the bottom is truly a triangle wave, or at least it's almost a perfect triangle wave. It occurred to me that you could make all sorts of different wave shapes out of the triangle wave. Like, consider this center point, right? So the center point is at the maximum. If I were to drag that center point all the way to the left, I would have the sawtooth wave again, right? And in fact, what I could do is I could change the leading edge and the trailing edge, you say the left edge and the right edge, in different ways, right? Like, what if we took one side and we modified it exponentially, okay, to get like these kind of curves, and then modified the right side in a logarithmic way? That would be kind of interesting, right? And so that created, let's see, do I actually have a triangle? I think I'm just going to hybrid tries. I don't think I do. So we'll take this patch and modify it. What this led to, let's see, we'll go into KRC Math Volume 4, which is where you'll find all these things. It led me to create these hybrid triangle waveforms. Let's look at a few of these. So here's one where you see the right slope of the triangle wave is being modified logarithmically, and the left slope is being modified in a exponential way. And so here's what this sounds like. And I'm also just setting that center point in a different way. Here's another one. Whoa. So you can see that, or you can possibly see that, there we go. You can start to see that here. The left edge is being curved in an exponential fashion. The right edge is being curved in a logarithmic fashion. And the center point of the waveform is moving as we go up the wavetable. So it's moving from about, I don't know, it looks like it's about maybe 20% of the waveform to the left and then up to the right. And so this creates, well, one, a really interesting looking waveform, right? But also a really interesting sounding waveform. You know, these have characteristics of both the square wave and the sawtooth wave. Like up here at the top of the wavetable, this flat region and this very sharp drop off. Look at that. That's kind of like a pulse waveform, right? And in fact, it sounds a lot like a pulse waveform. And then it's going to move down here to where this is this modified triangle that's almost a square tooth wave, right? If we had moved this center point over to 0, essentially, we would have a pure sawtooth wave. In this case, it's not all the way to the left, so it sounds like a filtered saw wave. But sweeping over the wavetable, why do I always say wavetable? It's a wavetable. And so you can run all sorts of different algorithms, right? And I was like, okay, well, let's just try some different ones. Like this one, you see that it's a very sharp logarithmic change on the right and kind of a shallower exponential change on the left. And it starts with almost a pure triangle wave, right? We start with the 50% point and we move all the way to 100%, the right side of the wave. And this sounds like this. You know, so we've essentially got a sawtooth wave that morphs in a nonlinear way into the triangle wave. All right. You know, then you can do just all sorts of other variations on this with like using different scaling factors for the left and the right sides and different different points and moving the point in different ways. And I'm in the Mathwaves Volume 4 collection, I called these hybrid triangle waves, and I essentially manually changed my equations to come up with these different flavors. Right? But then it occurred to me that, like, well, we could just go full ham on these, and we could like automate the. So that was nice and rich. we could automate, picking the cutoff point. We could randomize it. We could go between, any two, left and right points, from 0 to 100. And then we could randomize how we scale the, logarithmic and the exponential edge. And so that resulted in a whole bunch more of these. And because these kind of look like shark fins, I call these shark waves. You could call them a shark fin waveform. And I generated 1024 of those and put them in a collection called KRC Shark, because they're just super useful. They're super interesting, for doing like kind of new variations on classic synthesizer sounds. I guess if I should click one, so I actually select it. Like, here's one that's like, looks kind of gentle. But then, because we're randomizing all these different factors, we get lots with lots of different variations. And so these sound really great if you layer them with other classic synthesis waves, or if you layer them with variations. So let's see. Let's look at our Shark Explorer. This is kind of the more basic patch that led to the one I played in the intro. Like, that's super nice, right? So here in oscillator 1, we've got Shark 06. Here in oscillator 2, we've got Shark 23. We can listen to what this guy sounds like by himself. Nice and bright and sawtoothy. And then the one that's over in oscillator 1, a little more mellow. And I've put a very gentle filter on these. I'm using the 2-pole low pass, which probably doesn't get enough use in modwave. It's a great sounding filter. The 2-pole filters were common in Oberheim synths, and while this isn't an emulation of like an SEM type 2-pole filter, it's a good sounding filter, and you have options for like how the resonance responds to the bass, and like all of the modwave filters, it responds well to the trim kind of function. And so the other thing I've done here is just like with that sawtooth wave example, these waveforms are detuned with respect to each other, right? So one is shifted up 0.7 cents, and the other one is shifted, I'm sorry, that's actually 7 cents. And then one is shifted down 5 cents here. I probably meant to make this 7, because when I do this kind of detuning, I usually take one waveform and move it down several cents, and then the other waveform move it up several cents, so that the center of pitch is still the correct pitch on the keyboard. It turns out that it doesn't matter that much if you're only doing like a little bit. If you're only doing a little bit of that kind of offset tuning, but note that if you did keep one at 0 and you moved another one, more radically, a larger number of cents, this will eventually sound out of tune with other instruments. It won't while you're listening to it here, but if you were going to use this patch in a track, you would find that, the tuning sounds off on that. So anyway, there was a random synthesis tip for you. Random synth tip. Let's go back to plus and minus 7 cents here. The other thing that's going on in this patch is that we probably have, so we've got unison on it. So we're generating another 2 voices, and those are offset by 11 cents, and with some stereo panning here, blah blah blah. But it's like, it's so great. And then you can just go through and you can, just kind of pick different ones of these, and you will get like just kind of amazing variations on that kind of patch. You know, if we move the cutoff, you know, so you could do plucks with these, you could do pads, all sorts of interesting things. And it's nice to have an alternative, you know, to a square or a sawtooth wave. And there you go. Okay. There's just a lot to explore here. You heard the intro patch. Let's see, is it this one? Whoops, no, it's not that one. Shark Explorer 2. Oh, why are they not sorted by name? That's why I'm having such a hard time moving from one patch to another. Let's see. Is this actually the one I was playing? Oh yeah, it is. The fat fingers. Oh, Mr. Bond, I'm here to kill you. Let's see. Stop that. Stop that arpeggiator, that latched arpeggiator. Stop that. So anyway, so now you can see from that intro patch, what I did is I combined in layer A, this kind of shark pad, or, you know, whatever, call it a burst, it's filter sweep. And then in layer B, there's I'm using the exponential and log saw sounds that are being modulated. You know, and we're using a little wavetable morphing on this one to go to a completely different wavetable at some points. And then we've got the, you know, the good old Korg modulation sequencer going. Oops, this is designed to have the ARP on. Anyway, lots of fun to be had there. Okay, there is another waveform that we want to talk about. Let's talk about square and pulse waves. And why did I not name this something that I would look for, right? Where's my pulse? I thought I had a pulse. I thought I had a PWM. What's going on? What's happening? I'm going to have to edit this, aren't I? You know, I say that all the time, and then I never actually edit anything. There's totally some PWMs in here. Maybe I didn't tag them right. There it is. Oh, yeah. It's in a different collection. Okay. What a dum-dum. All right. Okay. So the other, you know, classic synthesis wave form is the square wave, right? And one thing that is very common to do with square waves is to modulate the duty cycle of the square wave. And that is a sound that we call PWM, pulse width modulation, right? Let's talk about how a square wave works. Let's take off our, there we go. We'll take off our PWMing, as it were, on oscillator 1. Let's also disable that on oscillator 2. And so these waveforms, or wavetables, are PWM wavetables. So in the center point, let's turn down oscillator 2. And let's turn up our filter cutoff. This is what we call the square wave. So it's a special case of the pulse wave with a 50% duty cycle. Duty cycle means that it goes from this straight line high, the maximum value, to the low value at the 50% point. And as we modulate that duty cycle, we get something that sounds much more sawtooth-like. And these are, you can hear when you get to a very small pulse width. This is, I think this pulse PWM1, I think goes from a 10% duty cycle to a 90% duty cycle up here. These have a very kind of nasal timbre that's a lot like the modified sawtooth waves that we heard before, right? So, you can just grab a square wave here, but you can also do PWM on these. And that's a very specific sound, right? That's, what is that being modulated by? OS1? As we change the speed of that, we get a slightly different effect. And if we go full ham, we get this kind of wild sound. And then again, if we were to go back to our, oops, that's not our original patch. Come on, man. Take off that filter. Doop, doop. Okay, I mean, you're probably familiar with pulse width modulation, but there you go. There are some other versions in variations on this in Math Volume 4. So we looked at Pulse PWM 1 and 2. There are some other versions. Pulse PWM 3 uses, instead of a linear modification, a linear pulse width change, we do it exponentially. And so this is a slightly different sound. Again, this was just kind of to, if you have a synthesizer that maybe, the envelope or the oscillator doesn't, isn't as flexible as in something like modwave, it gives you a different way of kind of moving that PWM sound. Okay, so those are all there to explore. Not much else to say about square waves, I guess. Let's see. Let's turn off that modulation. Let's do this. There are these ones, for example, like exponential 3 here. You can see that so the duty cycle goes from very narrow. Let's move our phase a little bit. Very narrow to very wide. So I think it's like a 1% to like 99%. So that's a very, very narrow pulse. Wow, I'm making pulse wave wow face. So again, these are useful, right, anywhere that you might use a square wave. It's just nice to have pulse waves right where you need them. Okay, I did want to go back to, there's an interesting thing. If you want to learn more about the PWM wave, which is, again, this, such a very specific sound. Now, the reason, actually, that PWM is included on a lot of, analog oscillators is that in a monosynth, it kind of gives you two oscillators at once. If you listen to the sound, it sounds very much like the detuned saws that we heard before, right? And this is just a fun science fact for you. Fun synthesizer science fact. It turns out actually that if you modulate the pulse width of a square wave using a triangle type of LFO, this is what we call the PWM wave. When people say the PWM wave, they mean a square wave where we're modulating the duty cycle with a triangle wave. This very specific modulation actually creates two sawtooth waves. It really does. And there's a great article from many years back from Sound on Sound magazine where the author is actually talking about how you could use, say, sample-based synths to create PWM. And it turns out that like all you need to do that is an upward going saw and a downward going saw, and then you modulate their pitch in a very specific way. It's a super interesting article, and it doesn't really look at the mathematics of why this happens, but it takes kind of a more visual approach. And there's lots of great diagrams that actually prove that when you do this to a square tooth wave, you really do wind up with two sawtooth waves, but they're detuned in a very specific way against each other. And so actually, following along with that, I actually made a perfectly PWM sounding patch in wave state, which is of course the sample-based synthesizer. Super interesting stuff. Anyway, I guess that's all I really wanted to show for today. Like and subscribe. Go get KRC Mathwaves, www.wavetables.lol. It's usually $29. It's still on special for a couple of days. There's an offer. I will have a coupon code, discount code link in the description. Maybe we'll link to that SOS article, stuff like that. Hey, happy wavetabling. Happy synthesizing. Okay, ta-ta for now.